Thanks for checking out Scotty's Hobbies. Today we're going to be replacing the front pads and rotors on this 2007 Honda Accord. This will be the same, if not very similar, on many other makes and models, as well as be pretty similar to most of the conventional brake systems out there on the road. So hopefully you'll gain the know-how on how to replace your own pads and rotors and gain some confidence in your vehicle. There will be a list below on the makes and models that the parts are the same or similar to the vehicle in this video, such as the ACURA ILX, the 13 to 15, Honda Accord 03 to 07, the Civic 2013 to 2021, that's pretty good, Honda CRZ of a 2018, and a Honda Fit of 2014. A lot of people ask if they really need their brakes done. One way or indication of needing brakes is your brake pads being worn out. You can see this little gauge tool I have right here. If you want one, you could find a link in the description to purchase one, but this will help you know where your brake pads are at, or where the life of the brake pads are at. Before we get started on the brake job, I like to make sure these screws that are on here for the production, or to make production easier, I loosen these up before I get too far in case I need to hold the brake pedal down or need some extra help. So that's one of the first things I do, using an impact driver. That impact driver right there, again, link in the description below to purchase if you need one and you don't have one laying around. Another way to know or to see if you need brakes is through this little inspection window on the brake caliper. Of course, you're going to need the wheel removed to see where your brake pad life is at by using that window, but there is another way to see where your brake pad life is at, especially checking the inner brake pad. Using a 13mm 6-point socket on a 3/8 drive, I'm going to remove the bolts from the caliper into the bracket, set them off to the side. When we install these later on in this video, I will give you the proper torque specification. And if this video helps you out, make sure you comment below with the year, make, and model of the vehicle that this video helped you on. When you select brake pads and rotors to put on your vehicle, make sure you select a brake pad set that comes with the hardware kit. If you're going to be doing this, saving money doing it on your own, you might as well get the really good parts. So brake pad kit with a hardware kit is a must. We're going to be using an old brake pad to press in the piston and the caliper. Before you remove the brake pads, make sure you take note of where your wear indicator is at and how your brake pads are just positioned. Before compressing the piston into the caliper, you need to make sure the brake fluid reservoir is loosened up. When you press the brake fluid back into the reservoir, you don't want to blow any seals. I've never had that happen to me, but there's always a first, and I'd hate to be the one. Using a brake caliper compression tool, we're going to push the piston back into the caliper. This is a pretty cheap caliper compression tool. You could pick this one up at your local parts store for about 15-20 bucks, and it works just fine. If you're going to be doing other brake jobs, there are larger kits out there that will be more adaptable to more calipers, but this one works just fine for me. And if you do need any parts or tools shown in this video, make sure you look for a link in the description below to purchase those. I'll do my best to get you the best deal as well. After you get the piston pressed all the way into the caliper, you don't want to let your caliper just hang from the brake line right there. I use a bungee cord and I go through that little inspection window and back up to the spring and suspend the caliper itself so it's not just hanging on that hose. You can remove that bracket right there using a 10mm if you need some more wiggle room with your caliper. Now you could go ahead and remove your inboard brake pad. This brake pad is going to have your wear indicator on it. Usually the inboard brake pads are the ones with the wear indicators, but you always want to look at the whole brake system before you take it apart so you put it back the same way. Here I'm removing the hardware kit. These are silencers or shims. I always replace these. Some people clean them off and lube them up, but I always put brand new fresh ones on with no lube. Using a 6.17mm socket on a 1/2-inch drive and a 1/2-inch breaker bar, I am going to loosen these bolts that hold the caliper to the hub. Really not that hard because the torque specification It's pretty tight, but it's not like 150 pounds or anything like that. It's not like an axle nut. So that one was not too bad to get those off. Again, when we install all this later on in the video, I will go over proper torque specs on these bolts. Now, doing a job like this at home, you're going to save a few $100, I'd say. The labor time on this brake job calls for 1.8 hours. That's replacing both rotors and the brake pads. So around here, $90 to $100 an hour. That's about, let's say, about 200, 180 in labor that you'd be saving. So you do save a couple bucks doing this on your own. Using my impact driver, I'm going to remove these production screws. To use the impact driver, all you need to do is turn the driver in the direction you want the screw to turn, and while it's being held there, just knock it with a hammer. It'll turn it in that direction. Doesn't take too much oomph, and let the job do the work for you instead of you trying to turn it. When you knock it, it'll turn it. If your rotor doesn't come off, hit it with a little something, kick it, give it a little donkey kick if you want, whatever you need to get it off. And don't worry about damaging it if you're going to be replacing with a new rotor. If you're going to machine your old rotor, if it's still good, or if that's what you choose to do, use a rubber mallet or something like that to remove your brake rotor. I couldn't find a torque specification for these screws right here, but I assume like German torque specs of Gudendite are just fine. You don't need to over tighten them. It'll just make the job harder later. Just get it nice and snug to hold the rotor in place when you're installing the rest of the brake system. Makes it a lot easier actually. Instead of having to use a lug nut, these retaining screws or production screws save you some time. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Tell everybody about me. If you know somebody maintaining their vehicle, trying to save money, get better gas mileage, more efficiency out of their vehicle, tell them about me, please. And here you can see I'm putting on the new hardware kit. It clips into place. These should not be wiggly. They shouldn't be loose, nothing like that. Sometimes the little ears, you can see I just made sure it's pressed down right there in the center. The ears are pressed out and it'll rub on the rotor and make this annoying sound that's kind of hard to find because it's tucked away inside the caliper. Give it a good once over, make sure everything's clipped into place. You can see this one wasn't, so I had to give it a little extra oomph, get it in there. Grab the bolts for your caliper bracket to your hub. Tighten them in pretty tight with your fingers so you're not wasting too much time using your torque wrench. I'm going to use a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench to tighten these down. These will end up being torqued to 80 foot-pounds using a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench. Get everything fastened properly. Doing proper or tightening to proper torque specification makes your job a lot, I'd say, safer, and it just gives you extra assurance that the job is done properly. You know it's not over tightened, and you know for sure it is tight enough because it is proper torque specification. Doing little things like this just makes you more proud of your job and gives you more gratification of driving your vehicle. It's something that you're proud of driving, you maintain it, you keep it going. So make sure you do a good, proper brake job if you're going to be doing this at home. This is the inboard brake pad with the wear indicator on it in the same location it was when we removed it. Squeeze them together, make sure they fit snugly, make sure there's nothing restricting those brake pads from moving in and out. You don't want to push the brakes and them not move, or push the brakes and them not move off of your rotor and wear out a lot faster. So make sure your brake pads move back and forth freely. Before we put the caliper on, we're going to clean these sliders and lube them. I'm using my BJ towel, which is my brake job towel, you guys. That is only used to wipe off brake grease, and I set it off to the side and I'll get it out for my next brake job. Now that the sliders are cleaned off and everything, I'm going to lube them up with this synthetic brake lube. This is specifically meant for this application because brakes get hot, like really, really hot. So this grease won't break down and get runny or anything like that. It's actually meant for this. There will be a link in the description below to purchase this grease, and I would highly recommend you use it. I'm not screwing that slider in, I'm just making sure it slides in easily, and I'm going to push it in and out of the hole or the bore, whatever you want to call it, and make sure that there's nothing restricting the slider as well. You want these to move freely and easily, nothing getting in their way, nothing hampering their movement. I also will wipe off the excessive grease out of the boot between the bracket and your slider right there. I don't want any grease to pop out after we start driving. Another thing to look at before you go too far is your boots. The boots on the caliper bracket right there, if they look old, cracked, ripped, or anything like that, of course change those. You don't want any dirt, debris, contamination to get in your sliders and cause your brake job to go bad quickly. Lube up your bottom slider. Make sure your sliders don't get mixed on the top and the bottom too. I like to do one at a time so I don't get these confused. Make sure the slider slides in and out. There's nothing stopping it from moving. You don't want your caliper to go sideways, so make sure everything moves freely. Grab the caliper from hanging off of your spring right here. We already compressed the caliper piston, so your caliper should slide right on right now with no problems. I've never had a piston leak pressure, but also as well, while your caliper is hanging up there, never touch the brake pad. You don't want to push the piston all the way out of the caliper. These caliper bolts to the sliders are really thin bolts, so the torque specification on these is not great at all. You're going to tighten these down finger tight, get them nice and snug, and then grab a 3/8 drive and a 6.13 millimeter socket. The torque specification in one side of the book says 26 foot-pounds for these bolts, which I think is totally fine, and that's what I torqued them down to in this video. I did find another location that said 37 foot-pounds, but that seems a little excessive, and it might have been a typo. So I'm going to say these are 26 foot-pound on the torque specification. These bolts are really easy to strip and break, so using proper torque specification is a really highly recommended thing to do. Tighten your reservoir cap, clean off all the excessive oil before you go too far, and pump the brake. You should feel a very soft pedal. When you get to about 3 or 4 pumps, it should get really firm. After that, you're going to go back and put your wheel on. Make sure you don't have any leaks or anything like that. Of course, we are going to torque down the lug nuts when we're all said and done. I'm using my gun just to get everything started and snugly put up there. I'm going to torque these down to, I believe, about 100 foot-pounds using my torque wrench when it gets on the ground. That's pretty much it on this super easy brake job. If you have any questions, make sure you comment below and ask away. Hopefully one of these 2 videos right here will suit your needs as well. I'll see you on the next hopefully helpful video. Thanks for watching.